Today, we're on a quest to solve one of the hottest topics in the Yu-Gi-Oh community, alternative formats. Today, I'm here with our resident competitive Yu-Gi-Oh player, Johnny, and also from the Magic channel joining us is Yamin. How are you guys?
I play Magic.
That's great. You play a game that actually has other formats you can play. What is that like?
Yu-Gi-Oh just straight does not have other formats at all?
So we do have other formats, but in general, the only real officially supported, everyone 90% of players play is one format.
Wow, really?
Yes.
No. So if I pick up Yu-Gi-Oh, there's one way for me to play.
If you want to go to your local game store and play Yu-Gi-Oh with people, they're pretty much all going to be the same.
If my favorite card is not played in that format, I can't play with my favorite card.
Nope. And if you got into Yu-Gi-Oh through Master Duel, you won't be able to play the same game because it's also not the same format and it's mixed with the Japanese format, which we don't have access to.
I see plenty of Yu-Gi-Oh cards around the office.
Yeah.
I assume 80% of them just never hit the table anywhere.
That's kind of the problem.
I'm sorry, but that's... They're supposed to be game pieces, not... What?
Ball. They're balls.
In Yu-Gi-Oh, there's what's called the advanced format, which is the main format that we play with a ban list from Konami. It's every card that's ever been printed in Yu-Gi-Oh can be played, minus whatever's on the Forbidden Limited list. There's also a traditional format, which no one really plays, which is the same thing, except all the banned cards are at one copy instead of being banned. And it's all just Exodia, OTK, and dumb garbage, so no one bothers with.
No, it's not good.
And other than that, it's mostly just these time capsule sort of formats where people go back to a ban list and say, let's play with all the cards from 2010, and then they all play together like that.
Did no one ever inform you that you can play with the packs or something? You can crack packs, play with them?
Well, draft doesn't really work for us because ever since 2010, 12, 14, we started having way too many archetypal cards. So if you open a pack, you have one card that only works with other cards that were printed 3 sets previously. And so if you open a Yu-Gi-Oh booster, you basically have no synergy between the cards, and so you can't really draft. The only way to do draft in Yu-Gi-Oh is by doing a cube, and that's not supported.
Draft in Magic is there's 5 colors in the pack, and I'll start taking the red cards, and now I have some white cards, so maybe I'll play a red-white deck, and you draft a deck and it's fun. Imagine doing Magic Draft, 12 cards in a pack or whatever, but imagine there's 500 colors in Magic.
Yeah, okay.
So every pack you open, it's oh yeah, I'll take a purple card, I'll take an orange card, I'll take a gray card. It keeps going, right? So the synergies are so tight-knit, like you're saying, you can't do something like draft, which is also just a crime because draft is so easy to do with your friends, to just buy a box and open some packs and play some games. But they did do battle packs for a while, which were cool. They were dedicated draft Yu-Gi-Oh sets that were, a box with 8 packs or whatever, and you'd open them with your friends and make decks. But they didn't sell well, so they canceled them. They did 3 of them, and then they said, nah, sales aren't good. We'll stop doing that. No one wants to draft Yu-Gi-Oh. Meanwhile, I was I love drafting Yu-Gi-Oh. This is a great time. I loved those battle packs, but now they're gone.
Do people not come up with community formats? Because in Magic, so what happened in the past multiple times is some community came up with a new set of rules for a format. And it's the hype of the month. I don't know if there's any Magic players watching, there's Tiny Leaders. That was very popular for 2 days. But it was an interesting format. Do people not innovate?
You guys have so many formats, you make a new one, play it for 3 days, and then you're on to the next one.
Basically, yes.
So that's the main alternative formats in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are these time wizard formats where we go back in time to a previous ban list and we play like that. And actually, those have been quote unquote officially supported at some of the larger YCSs and stuff like that. They run side events where they say, this is a GOAT format 2005 ban list side event. And they have big events with those ban lists. So unlike in Magic where there's Commander and everyone plays Commander. If you play Magic, you play Commander. In Yu-Gi-Oh, if you're looking to play an alternative format, there's already such a subdivide through the alternative formats that the communities are so much smaller between all of them That there's no like one agreed upon alternative way to play like Commander was. And Commander started as a community format, didn't it?
It did. The story is actually kind of crazy because it started as a community made-up format, right? Like people made up those rules that were not part of the game design team of Wizards.
Right.
And then it grew from there, and it grew and grew and grew to the point that Wizards couldn't ignore it. Like, Wizards first, of course, didn't plunge themselves into, let's only make product for this format. They, like, dipped their toes in to see, is there profit to be made? I mean,
right, yeah. So, yeah, where was the line drawn between Wizards, like, putting out their first Commander product? Like, what did that look like?
I think the first ever Commander product, it was just pre-constructed decks, if I remember at the time, like the very first pre-constructed decks. But here's a wild take for Yu-Gi-Oh! How about you just port Commander over? Just allow a single copy of every card. Like, you can still have a ban list, like of the really bad stuff, and then just one copy of every card. How about that? Like, just spice it up a little.
And there actually is a fan Yu-Gi-Oh! Commander format that people are working on right now. I think it's called Domain format. Do you know what I'm talking about, Johnny?
Yeah, we get that a lot in the comments as well. People asking for Deckmaster and Domain.
Deckmaster and Domain,
But it's still very like fringe. Not many people play it. We also have a Pauper format that's called Common Charity. And like, so we have these things, but no one knows about them because it's just so few people that play them, and because everything that Konami does is just for the main format, it just doesn't get supported. And if you want to play an old format, the cards are so expensive because they don't get reprinted. And we recently started getting some of these older cards, but it's just like, it's really hard to get into because there's no official resources.
Have you guys considered creating a format that's fun to play so like a community can gather around it? Because
there's
from what you're saying, it feels like, yeah, we have these like community made up formats like Pauper and Commander, but they're just not like, there's no community for them. In Magic, when, I don't know, I make up a format with my play group at the LGS and people will play it if it's fun, if they find fun in like deck building.
I think we didn't really have that in physical, but digitally we had what Simo made, the progression series. That was like the one big like alternative format that people played, where you just open a virtual box of one set of the first set of Yu-Gi-Oh, build a deck, play against each other, and then you open the next one and the next one, and you gradually upgrade your deck. That thing went everywhere in the Yu-Gi-Oh community, but physically, like, making this kind of thing is way too expensive, and so we didn't really have any of these like fun formats that I know. There's lots of them, but they're so fringe and so like small niche communities that they're not really.
I think that's the biggest thing is like we have all these tiny formats all over the place, but there's no like agreed upon community like that everyone plays this format, right? Because even within like competitive Magic, you guys have like Vintage and Legacy and Standard and like all these different like quote unquote competitive formats. Whereas in Yu-Gi-Oh, it's like, oh, if you play competitive, you play competitive. And if you play GOAT, you play GOAT, and you don't play competitive, basically, right? Like,
though if there's one thing to be taken away from that, like Magic does have these different formats, but officially supported competitive formats, there's basically like 2, maybe 3. You've got Standard, Modern, and Pioneer. But local communities, like one of the biggest tournaments each year in Magic right now is Paupergeddon, which is around Pauper, which is not like really supported tournament-wise by Wizards of the Coast themselves. So once again, it's like the local communities that make up something that they're fond of, right? That they really enjoy, and then grow that via tournament organizers, and then online communities. Like they grow that themselves until it's kind of taken over by the game designers acknowledging that this is of the size that it becomes relevant. So I'll throw in one final hot idea into the ring. I know that current Yu-Gi-Oh! Is very much based around comboing, disrupting your opponent during one specific turn, searching your library for like additional combo pieces. Is there a way to bring Yu-Gi-Oh! Back to combat-based Yu-Gi-Oh! Or like turn-based Yu-Gi-Oh! Where we each play 10 turns or like 20 turns with like a simple rule to restrict gameplay? Is there something to take it back to the basics, back to the anime with like a simple restriction?
Other than literally taking it back to the basics and just saying, oh, we'll play like it's 2005.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's basically what the community has decided.
That's why we have those time wizard formats, because people are like, I liked when we did like a bit of extra deck summoning. Edison was cool, so let's try that out. The issue is if you, for example, say you can only activate 5 cards per turn, which would limit a lot of things. It would kill about 75 to 90% of any deck that's come out since the last 5 years.
But that's the point. That's really good.
But then if you do that, you can't just say, okay, let's just play toss, because that's 5 years ago. Then you don't need to say like, let's include all of the cards and let's put this registry. Let's just say, okay, we just play starting at this time frame.
Yeah, I mean, what you said too about like the expression of deck building and stuff, I feel like in Yu-Gi-Oh, people get very attached to certain decks they're playing. And maybe that's just because in Yu-Gi-Oh, every deck tends to play so mechanically different from each other. Like, I'm sure obviously that's true in Magic as well. But in Yu-Gi-Oh, there's decks that quite literally are the only cards in the game that have that certain mechanic. So like, oh, I attack and then it goes back into my deck and I shuffle it in and I bring a different guy out. Or like just really like weird interactions that only your deck does. So if I play a deck and I play 3 cards a turn and that's my turn, and I walk up and I say, hey, why don't we do a format where we only play 3 cards a turn? And you're like, oh, well, my deck plays 6 cards a turn and I love my deck and I don't want to play your stupid format, but but my deck is fine, so it's a fun format, trust me guys, right? So I think there's a lot of like personality that comes into it as well when people are trying to create these rule sets. And like, there's also an official Heart of the Underdog format, if you go on Konami's website, that basically just says, oh yeah, go to your local game store and you can do a Heart of the Underdog tournament. And you as your store just decide what decks aren't allowed in the tournament. And then you run a tournament like that. It's like, could you imagine trying to have like a council of Yu-Gi-Oh players be like, oh yeah, Yaman, you can't play your deck because you're too good. Banned. Snake Eyes is banned and whatever.
All right, now that makes it sound like the core issue might be related to the direct synergy between cards themselves. Like one card saying that it, like the core archetypes being so tightly knit where you can't combine cards from different archetypes, or if you do, then we have archetype A and archetype B and we just slap them together into a deck and like they play their own thing.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Deck building expression is severely limited by, if I play this card, I also need to play these other 5 cards. No question is asked.
Basically.
I'm calling it now. Whoever solves the issue of cross-compatibility of archetypes in Yu-Gi-Oh! Will create the most fun format of all time for that game. Because it feels like, from what you're saying, if you eliminate that issue somehow, and you actually get to play different cards in different ways that you haven't experienced before, and just create these wacky decks or something, you get to have fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you've seen the text on Yu-Gi-Oh cards. You know it's all just like restrictions and what you can and can't do and stuff. So we really should mention Speed Duel, which essentially they made Yu-Gi-Oh 2 and they put it on store shelves. They went back to basics. They said, okay, it's all the old school cards you remember, like from day one, like anime stuff, basically.
Only combat focused.
More combat focused. And then they added like character abilities. So you would essentially play as characters in the anime.
That sounds hella cool.
And once per game, really, you would have this like, oh, I use Pegasus's special ability, which lets me see a card in your hand, or like whatever it was, right?
Nice.
The problem was the launch was a disaster. No one wanted it, or no one even knew what it was, because they just put these packs on store shelves with like Yugi and Joey on it and whatever, and they just looked like a regular Yugi pack, and they just said Speed Duel in the corner. And then you open them, and it was just a bunch of vanilla monsters, like cards from like 2002. So everyone was like, what is this, basically? Later on, it got better. They started doing these sort of like party boxes that were like a box you would buy with like 8 ready to play decks inside. Nice, yeah. So you could buy one, get together with your friends, have a little mini like Yu-Gi-Oh anime tournament basically. And that made way more sense. But yeah, basically it was just like regular Yu-Gi-Oh packs right next to Speed Duel packs. And then it was just
People just didn't understand what
no
was
one
happening.
understood, and it was just so confusing. And like kids would buy the wrong packs, and
Oh, no.
it was a whole thing. But yeah, they've sort of figured it out just in time for them to cancel it. But now it's dead. So here we are.
All right, I'll give you the hot take to end this video, which is if you play Singleton and you don't allow searching your deck, you'll have the best time ever in Yu-Gi-Oh! I have very little idea of what I'm talking about because I have no idea about Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. But you just don't search your deck, you play Singleton decks, and then smooth sailing from there. Equip your Blue Eyes White Dragon with the axe thing, I remember.
Acts of despair.
Probably.
Yeah.
And go hit your opponent.
I wish it was as easy as just play Commander. Just do Yu-Gi-Oh! Commander.
Just have a permanent mistake up and just play Highlander. That's the new rules.
Right. But even, like, I tried to look into Domain, and it was like the deck building rules. Like, Commander, it's easy. You just go, oh, you're like color identity, and those are the cards you play. In Domain, they're like, okay, so if you're your main monster, you can use their type and their attribute, and also any cards they mention in their card text, you can use cards with those types of those cards. And I was just like, I can't even understand how I would begin to build a deck for this. But maybe Domain will take off. We'll see. Maybe we
can try that maybe one video.
If you want to see a Domain format video, let us know in the comments below. Yamin, thank you so much for your Magic the Gathering insight. We hope one day to have some official support from Konami for our formats. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye for now.